An unimaginable crime. The father and stepmother convicted of torturing a 6-year-old to death. Emma Tustin and Thomas Hughes subjected Arthur Labinio Hughes to months of depraved cruelty.
They are cold, calculating, systematic torturers of a defenceless little boy. They're wicked, evil.
There are difficult questions tonight for the authorities who saw Arthur in the months before he died. Also on the programme, the Duchess of Sussex takes aim at the British tabloids after her latest victory over the publishers of the Mail on Sunday. A flood of Christmas cancellations, even though the Prime Minister insists it's OK to party. And Alec Baldwin claims he didn't pull the trigger in the film set shooting of Helena Hutchins.
This is the ITV Evening News with Romilly Weeks.
Good evening. We start tonight with the murder of a 6-year-old boy that's so shocking and appalling it will make you question how anyone could ever do such a thing to a defenceless child. Arthur Labinio Hughes' sad, short life ended with him being tortured, tormented and starved at the hands of his own father and his father's girlfriend. Today, Emma Tustin was found guilty of Arthur's murder. His father, Thomas Hughes, was found guilty of manslaughter. After the verdicts, the court held a minute's silence in Arthur's memory. And the evidence the jury heard had been harrowing. During her campaign of abuse, Tustin had recorded Arthur sobbing how no one loved him and no one was going to feed him. Social services and police did see Arthur 2 months before he died, but no action was taken. And a warning that this report from our correspondent Ben Chapman contains a distressing audio recording as well as video of some of Arthur's final moments.
This is Arthur Labinio Hughes on the last morning of his life. Weak, emaciated and struggling to stand after weeks of being threatened, beaten, starved and poisoned with salt, which prosecutors described as child torture. Later, this once happy little boy suffered a fatal brain injury at the hands of his father's girlfriend, the violence encouraged by his dad.
To see a child that ill and what they were doing to him, tormenting him, abusing him, they are cold, calculating, systematic torturers of a defenceless little boy. They're wicked, evil.
Arthur's killer was Emma Tustin.
He was headbutting the floor on all fours. Headbutted the floor once, said, "Get up, you're going to hurt yourself. I've phoned your dad."
On the day she murdered him, she claimed to police that his injuries were self-inflicted.
And he headbutted the floor 3 times.
Here on this cop.
But she and his father, Thomas Hughes, had been abusing Arthur for months, ever since they'd moved into her house in Solihull in March last year. In clips that are difficult to listen to, she even made recordings of Arthur in distress. As a punishment, Arthur was made to stand in the hallway for up to 14 hours a day. His cries for help went largely unheard because this all happened during the first lockdown last year. But both the police and social services did visit him 2 months before he died. His paternal grandmother made a report on April the 16th after noticing bruises on Arthur's back. The next day, social workers came to the house and examined Arthur, but found no safeguarding concerns. The police also decided to take no further action. A week later, the social workers were shown the photograph, but there were still no follow-up visits before Arthur's death in mid-June. Did the police miss an opportunity to save him?
The no further action by the police was in relation to criminal offences, but it was very much that it was over to social services and it was that joint investigation. The IOPC is conducting an investigation into the actions of the police response on that day.
Tustin and Hughes were manipulative.
The last 6 months, he's battered both my kids. He's smashed this house to pieces. He's battered his dad. He's hit me. When I tried to get him
Moments after inflicting horrific injuries on him, she sought to blame her 6-year-old victim. Convicted of murder and he of manslaughter, they'll be sentenced tomorrow. Arthur's mother is also in prison for an unrelated offence, but she paid tribute through his maternal grandmother.
If Arthur could ask for one final thing, it would be that he was remembered for his superpowers. That was what I will always remember for, his superpower. And Arthur's superpower was his smile.
The boy who died thinking he wasn't loved was, but left alone to his abusers, there was no one to protect him.
And Ben's at Coventry Crown Court tonight. Ben, so hard to listen to. This is one of the most terrible cases of child torture and abuse ever seen in this country. And tonight, of course, searching questions for the authorities involved.
Yes, and I think first of all it's important to remember the context in which all of this took place. It was the height of the first lockdown. Arthur wasn't going to school. He wasn't being seen by many of the people that you'd normally expect to spot that something wasn't right. And yet there was that concern raised by the paternal grandmother. There was that visit by social workers. How did they not spot the bruises on his back that were so obvious in that photo she'd taken just the day before? And when the social workers were shown that photograph a week later, why did nobody go back? These are just some of the questions. We don't have the answers yet. In a statement tonight, Solihull Council has described this as a terrible tragedy, but says it would be inappropriate to comment further because a safeguarding review will now take place. After the verdicts were returned here this afternoon, there was a very moving minute silence in court for the detectives, for the jury, for the journalists who've had to confront the harrowing details of what happened to Arthur. This has been an incredibly upsetting case, and there is lots more, I think, still to be learned.
OK, Ben in Coventry, thank you. To the day's other news now. The Duchess of Sussex has hailed her latest court success against the tabloid press as a victory for anyone who's ever felt scared to stand up for what's right. Judges threw out an appeal by the publisher of the Mail on Sunday over its printing of a letter Meghan wrote to her estranged father. And the Duchess has called for an overhaul of the way the media operates. Here's our royal editor, Chris Shipp, on what her victory could mean.
It's been a drawn-out legal drama. In fact, it was more than 2 years ago, on this day in South Africa in October 2019, when Meghan announced she was suing the Mail on Sunday for publishing the private letter she wrote to her father. Today, she notched up another win. For publishing that letter to Thomas Markle, the High Court had already found the Mail on Sunday had breached Meghan's privacy. But the newspaper had appealed and wanted it to go to a full trial. That was dismissed today by the Court of Appeal.
The Court of Appeal upheld the judge's decision that the Duchess had a reasonable expectation of privacy in the contents of the letter. And those contents were personal, private, and not matters of legitimate public interest.
During the appeal, the Mail on Sunday claimed Meghan had shared drafts of her letter with her press secretary Jason Knauf, seen here walking behind the couple. Meghan even used the word daddy to, in her words, pull at the heartstrings in case the letter was leaked. But Meghan today ripped into the Mail on Sunday and the tabloid press in general in a sharply worded statement from her home in California. What matters most, Meghan wrote, is that we are now collectively brave enough to reshape a tabloid industry that conditions people to be cruel and profits from the lies and pain that they create. Because as far removed as it may seem from your personal life, Meghan said, it is not. Tomorrow it could be you.
And she says that the tabloid model rewards chaos above truth, and then she's been the victim of deception, intimidation and calculated attacks. That's a pretty strong attack on the tabloid industry.
It isn't a strong attack on the tabloid industry, but then again, what would you expect from Meghan and Harry? They've been singing from this hymn sheet for quite some time. And just because they feel aggrieved by one newspaper doesn't mean that they need to attack the whole of the tabloid press.
The Mail on Sunday maintains all the evidence should be tested at trial, and despite losing against Meghan twice, its lawyers are considering taking this to the Supreme Court.
Chris, so victory for the Sussexes. How significant do you think this is for the Duchess?
Oh, I mean, it's really significant, and it's kind of led to that statement of hers today excoriating the British tabloid press. And perhaps we shouldn't be surprised. We know how much both she and also her husband, Prince Harry, detests certain elements of the tabloid press. And today they had a reason to put out that statement. But, you know, you've got to remember here that Meghan has now won twice against the Mail on Sunday. Firstly, in the original case at the High Court. Today, she's won again at the Court of Appeal. So I think it would be very brave lawyers from the Mail on Sunday if they were to decide to take this to the Supreme Court, the very highest court in the land, because all the judges so far have decided that privacy is paramount. It trumped everything else. Yes, there might have been questions about how much of this letter Meghan shared with her press secretary, the draft she shared with him. She even wrote the letter, she admits in these text messages to her press secretary. She wrote it in a way in which she anticipated the letter being leaked. And you heard in my report that, you know, choosing the word daddy so that it might pull at the heartstrings were the letter to be leaked. All of that was why the Mail on Sunday wanted this thing tested at a trial. They wanted all these things picked over. But all the judges so far have come back on this issue of privacy. This was a private letter Meghan wrote to her father, and that they have found in Meghan's favour.
And also some awkward questions for Prince Charles tonight over cash for honours allegations involving a former aide.
Yeah, far be it from me to accuse Prince Charles's charity of burying news on a busy day, but the facts are, on a busy royal day, as we've just been discussing, the Prince's Foundation released the findings of a report into a chap I think people would have heard of before called Michael Fawcett. He's an aide to Prince Charles for a very long time. In fact, he was employed by the palaces initially in the early 1980s. And they found that, yes, he did indeed. He was accused, of trying to fix an honour for a Saudi donor in return for donations. Now, the report today found that there was evidence that the former CEO did take communication and coordination work and between him and other fixers. Now, the palace, Prince Charles's office, says that His Royal Highness finds that charities which bear his name should operate to the highest standards. Michael Fawcett himself resigned a couple of weeks ago, but I should point out he's resigned from Prince Charles's employment before and found his way back. It's very hard to see how he will find a way back from this.
Chris, thanks for talking us through that. In a bid to increase vaccinations in Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel said the unvaccinated will be excluded from all but essential businesses. The German Parliament will consider a general vaccine mandate as part of efforts to curb infections. More than 70,000 cases have been confirmed in 24 hours. France is bolstering its restrictions too. From Saturday, all UK travellers will need a negative COVID test before entering the country. The new rules will apply to all countries outside the EU, regardless of vaccination status. Here, the Prime Minister has urged people not to cancel Christmas parties over fears of the Omicron variant. Boris Johnson said there was no need to stop events such as school nativities and office get-togethers. But there's been mixed messaging about socialising and even about who to kiss under the mistletoe, as our Deputy Political Editor Anushka Astana reports.
It's that time of year again. And at Wendell Park Primary School in West London, there's some impressive spelling. But here, like all over the country, the children will be playing to an empty hall. Their parents kept away because of COVID fears, but watching online.
Will you miss them when they're not here?
Yeah.
Do you wish they could come and clap you on?
Yes.
But how well are you going to do it for them at home?
Good.
It's really disappointing. I don't feel the guidance has kept up with the developments that are happening recently. And I think it leaves myself as a head teacher and in a vulnerable position where we're having to make these decisions where with the previous guidelines it was a lot clearer.
Uncertainty over the rules isn't just affecting nativity plays but Christmas parties too, and it is not surprising people are confused. After all, there have been mixed messages. First, the health chief, Jenny Harries, said we should limit socialising. Then Work and Pension Secretary Therese Coffey suggested no snogging under the mistletoe. Business Minister George Freeman admitted he would not be having a big Christmas do, but the Health Secretary insisted party but be cautious and test first. Prime Minister, people are confused. Can you clear things up for them?
Yes, the most important thing is that people should follow the guidance we've set out, and people shouldn't be cancelling things, and there's no need for that at all. That's not in what we're saying.
What they're saying is to wear masks in some places, follow new travel rules and get your booster if you're eligible, as the Prime Minister did today. But whatever the message, the arrival of Omicron is causing some businesses to suffer.
We had phone calls, emails about the cancellations for the Christmas bookings. Some of them were like party of 6 people, some of them party of 20, but the biggest booking that cancelled was booking for 48 people.
So what is it that is making people change their minds? Do you think the messages coming from government are clear?
No. To be honest, I think it's all really confused and there's a lot of mixed messages out there.
What about Christmas parties? Do you think we should have them?
Yes. Yeah, we didn't have them last year, so yeah, rock on this year.
And in some cross-party festive harmony, the Conservative Sajid Javid and Labour leader Keir Starmer today agreed, if you do party, you can kiss whoever you want.
Well, Anushka's in Westminster tonight. Anushka, let's turn first to the alleged Christmas party in Downing Street, which may have broken the rules last year. What's the Prime Minister had to say about that?
Well, when I asked the Prime Minister questions earlier on behalf of broadcasters, I asked him if no rules were broken, as he has repeatedly said, and as his officials have repeatedly said, why don't you make this story go away and tell us what actually happened? And he swerved that question, immediately bringing the subject back to what is happening this Christmas and the guidance this Christmas. At one point, he did say, because I've already told you, but I have to say that despite asking the Prime Minister as well as officials in Downing Street, no journalist yet has had actual details of what they say happened last year. And as you can imagine, some of these reports, which began in the Daily Mirror, are certainly causing anger. I've been speaking to people today who had to cancel their own Christmases last year, who ended up spending the day alone, and they're pretty furious about reports that Downing Street might have had different rules.
And Labour don't want to let it go either. They're calling for an inquiry tonight.
That's right. Labour are really pushing hard on this. Keir Starmer, the leader, using this subject as his main point in Prime Minister's questions yesterday. And then today, Deputy Leader Angela Rayner has written a letter that I've got here to Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary, pointing out that, you know, if the allegations are true, then these are quite serious issues. And she can't see, she says, how that could have been in line with the rules last year. Remember, London was at the time in Tier 3 restrictions, so pretty strict rules. And she's actually said to the Cabinet Secretary, did you know about these allegations before they were first reported in the papers? And either way, are you willing to investigate them? She points out that because of the restrictions, if any rules were broken, officials were basically being asked to break the law, and she suggests that they should be referred to the police if that was the case. Now, I've put this all back to Downing Street, and they insist, as they have repeatedly done so, that no rules were broken. That is the line they are absolutely sticking to.
Anushka, thank you very much for that. Still to come on the ITV Evening News, the desperation of the people still without power a week after Storm Arwen. And from the Maldives to Loch Lomond, the travelling turtle on his way to a happy home. Those stories and more after the break. Welcome back. Hollywood star Alec Baldwin says he didn't pull the trigger of a gun which caused the death of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. In his first TV interview since the tragedy, the actor says he would never point a firearm at someone and pull the trigger. And breaking down in tears, he said Hutchins was loved and admired by everyone who worked with her. Rebecca Barry has more.
She was a mother who died doing her job in almost unfathomable circumstances. Helena Hutchins, a cinematographer, shot by a gun in the hands of a Hollywood star.
She was someone who was loved by everyone who worked with and liked by everyone who worked with and admired.
6 weeks since the shooting, Alec Baldwin has now given his first full interview.
Even now, I find it hard to believe that. It just doesn't seem real to me.
It happened here in New Mexico on the set of a new film called Rust. During a rehearsal, Alec Baldwin was handed a gun thought to be loaded with dummy ammunition. Now he insists he never even fired the weapon.
The big question, and the one you must have asked yourself 1,000 times, how could this have happened? It wasn't in the script for the trigger to be pulled.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled the trigger?
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them, never.
How did a real bullet get on that set?
I have no idea. Someone put a live bullet in a gun, a bullet that wasn't even supposed to be on the property.
No criminal charges have been brought, but there's an investigation into how live rounds got into the gun.
You said you're not a victim, but is this the worst thing that's ever happened to you?
Yes. Yeah. Because I think back, and I think of what could I have done.
The full interview will be shown in the US tonight, but it still won't provide all the answers.
You've described it as a 1 in a trillion shot, and the gun was in your hand. How do you come to terms with that?
An even tougher reality for the family of Helena Hutchins. Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
Police Scotland is to pay out more than £1 million to the family of a young mother who died after officers took 3 days to respond to a car crash. Lamara Bell and her partner John Yule died after their car went off the M9 near Stirling in July 2015. A passerby alerted the police, but by the time they arrived, Mr. Yule was dead and Ms. Bell died in hospital 4 days later. And it's emerged that intruders had to be removed from the set of I'm a Celebrity during Storm Arwen. ITV said it happened after the contestants had been evacuated from the castle during high winds. It's the second time this series there's been an intrusion on the set. ITV was forced to cancel the show for 3 nights running because of the storm. And 120 military personnel have been called in to help residents in Aberdeenshire who are still without power 6 days after Storm Arwen struck. The troops will assist with welfare checks on those still suffering. Thousands of homes in mainly rural areas of Scotland and also in County Durham are still without power. Well, Chris Jepson is in the village of St John's Chapel in County Durham tonight. Chris, people must be getting really desperate now.
Yes, very desperate, Romilly. Remember, some people up here will be spending a 7th night without power and heating. A major incident has been declared in County Durham and Darlington, and here at the Village Hall, they've set up a command centre. We've seen today electrical engineers, councillors, police officers, fire crews and mountain rescue teams milling around offering support. And these winter warmer packages have just been delivered, ready to be distributed to vulnerable people still without power, containing things like torches, blankets, hot water bottles and flasks. In the nearby village of Rookup in the hills, we've met vulnerable people who are desperate for some help. Paul Webster is disabled and his stair lift isn't working, so he can't even go to bed. And he's been heating up food and water using a coal fire. Judy Lowe has lost a freezer full of food, which is now inedible, and is having to boil potatoes on a camping stove. They say that they want their heat and power restored as quickly as possible, and the Northern Grid told me today that they're trying to get the 10,000 or so homes still without power here in County Durham back on the grid by the end of the weekend.
Chris, thank you. And we end tonight with a Scottish home that's powering the recovery of a very special new resident. April the sea turtle was found floating in the Maldives, entangled in netting and with a plastic bag around her neck. She was already missing her right front flipper and was so badly injured she can't be released back into the wild. But she's just been given a new home at Sea Life Loch Lomond, where she'll help raise awareness of the dangers of plastics in our oceans. And that is all for now. But Julia's here with the news at 10. From me and all the team, goodbye.